three vertices of a parallelogram, ABCD, are A is minus 5 and minus 1, B is minus 1 and minus 4, and C is the point 6 and minus 2. And we're asked to find the coordinates of D. So just a visual diagram of what we have. We have A, B, C, and D. And because D is unknown, we're just going to let D be the point M and N. So the idea in this question is to use midpoints in order to find what the coordinate of D would be. So there are two ways to do it, but one way to do it is to use midpoints. So in a parallelogram, the midpoint of BD, so you have one diagonal BD, the midpoint of this diagonal is the same as the midpoint of the other diagonal, so in this case AC. So AC, this diagonal, has exactly the same midpoint as BD. So all we need to do in this case is find out what is the midpoint of AC. Once we have the midpoint of AC, we know that's the same midpoint between D and B. And then what we can do is say, well, then if we took M plus minus 1, divided that by 2, we would get the x coordinate of this midpoint. In the same way, if we took N plus minus 4 and divided that by 2, we would get the y coordinate of the midpoint. So the first thing we're going to do is find out what's the midpoint of AC. So the midpoint of AC, you take the x values of each of these coordinates, add them together, and divide it by 2. So in this case, we're going to have minus 5 plus 6 divided by 2. So minus 5 plus 6 becomes 1. So this is a half for the x coordinate of our midpoint. And the same way, add the y's together, divide by 2. So minus 1 plus minus 2 is going to be minus 3. And we divide that by 2. So that gives us minus 3 over 2. So that midpoint is the same midpoint between B and D. So what we can do is make two equations from this information. So now if we had to get the midpoint of BD, we would take minus 1 plus M divided by 2, which is this value over here. And we already know what the x coordinate of a midpoint is. It's a half. So these purple values are equal. In the same case for the y's, if we took minus 4 plus n divided by 2, we would get minus 4 plus n over 2. And this is equal to the y coordinate of our midpoint, which is minus 3 over 2. So these green values we can make equal as well. So equating the x coordinates, we're going to say minus 1 plus m all divided by 2 has to be equal to our midpoint x coordinate, which is a half. And now we just solve for m. So each side is being divided by 2, so to get rid of these 2's we do the opposite. We multiply both sides by 2, which gives us minus 1 plus m on the left side and 1 on the right side. And we just get m by itself, so we get m as 2. So that is the x coordinate of our D point. So now we just need to get the y value of our D coordinate. So keeping this same information here on the previous slide, we're just going to take this green portion, the y coordinate of our midpoint, which is minus 4 plus n over 2, that has to be equal to minus 3 over 2. So equating the y coordinates, we get minus 4 plus n over 2 is equal to minus 3 over 2, and now we just solve for n. So in the same way, we're dividing by 2 on both sides, so we can multiply both sides by 2 to remove these 2's. So we get minus 4 plus n is equal to minus 3. Getting n by itself, you would get n is equal to 1. So now we know what our values for m and n are. Since we have m is equal to 2 and n is equal to 1 for this coordinate, this means that the coordinate of D is 2 and 1. So that means our final diagram looks like this. So we have A, B, C, D, where D is the coordinate 2 and 1.